Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. Emma and I had been married for 10 years. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but lately, things had changed. She was distant, her phone was always glued to her hand, and she seemed to be smiling at messages more often than she smiled at me. I tried not to overthink it, convincing myself it was just stress or something she'd get over, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. One evening I got home earlier than usual. As I walked into the house, I immediately noticed something was off. Emma was rushing around, tidying up more than usual, her movements a bit too frantic. Her face lit up with surprise, and there was a hint of worry in her expression when she saw me. "You're home early," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. "Yeah, things wrapped up faster than I expected," I replied, my eyes sweeping across the room. There was an odd smell in the air, like cologne, one I didn't recognize. "What's that smell?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Emma hesitated, then laughed nervously. "Oh, I tried a new air freshener today. Maybe it's that." It was a weak explanation, but I nodded, pretending to accept it. Still, something didn't sit right with me. Her tone, her body language, it all felt off. Later that night, as Emma pretended to be asleep, I lay in bed, thoughts swirling in my head. Was I imagining things? Or was there something more going on? The distance between us had been growing lately. We hadn't had any intimate moments in the last 2 weeks, and even before that, things felt forced, almost mechanical. Emma always had an excuse: too tired, stressed, or simply not in the mood. I tried to be understanding, but it was becoming harder to ignore the widening gap between us. As I stared at the ceiling, the sense of unease deepened. Something was wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling. 2 days later, as I came back from work, our neighbor Jake was outside, waiting near his driveway. He raised a hand to stop me as I got out of my car. "Hey, Tom," Jake called, glancing around before lowering his voice. "Can we talk for a minute?" I nodded, curious and a little apprehensive. "Sure, what's up?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't sure if I should say something, but over the last few days I've noticed a guy leaving your house while you were at work. He was there today, too. I thought it might be suspicious, and I figured you should know." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. My mind raced as I tried to keep my expression neutral. "What did he look like?" I asked, my voice tight. Jake described a man I didn't recognize, adding, "I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it just didn't sit right with me. Thought it was better to tell you." I thanked him, forcing a smile before heading inside, my heart pounding as the unease transformed into something much darker. Emma was in the kitchen preparing dinner, her face lighting up as she saw me. "Hey, you're home," she said cheerfully, as if everything was perfectly normal. I walked over, forcing a casual tone. "Yeah, long day. What did you get up to today?" Emma paused for a fraction of a second, then smiled. "Oh, nothing much. Just went out with some friends, had lunch, and did a little shopping." I nodded, pretending to buy her story, though every word she said felt like a dagger. Jake's warning echoed in my mind. I knew she was lying, and that only made me more suspicious. Later that night, as Emma took a shower, I saw my chance. Her phone was on the nightstand, the screen dark. I hesitated for a moment, then grabbed it, quickly unlocking it. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her messages. There they were, texts with someone named Marcus. My stomach turned as I read through the conversation, flirty messages, heart emojis, and the worst of all. "Come to my house today. My husband is at work and won't be back until late." I felt a cold wave of shock wash over me. The betrayal was blatant, undeniable. Just then, the sound of water stopped. My heart raced as I quickly put her phone back on the nightstand, trying to steady my breathing. I couldn't get caught. Not yet. Emma came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I smiled at her, pretending nothing had changed, but inside, everything was different. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, unable to shake the images of what I had seen on Emma's phone. I couldn't believe what was happening. The woman I had loved and trusted for years was bringing another man into our home. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my gut. The next morning I made a decision. I couldn't confront her without solid proof. I needed to know the full extent of what was going on. So after Emma left the house, I went out and bought several hidden cameras. I placed them carefully around the house, one in the living room, another in the hallway, and one in our bedroom. Each camera was discreet, blending in with the surroundings. When I finished, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. I had to know, but part of me feared what I would find. That evening, when I got back from work, I immediately checked the footage. My hands were shaking as I opened the app and watched the recordings from earlier that day. There he was, the man Jake had described. He entered the house just after noon, wearing a smug grin as Emma welcomed him inside. They kissed right there in the living room before moving to the couch, laughing and talking as if they didn't have a care in the world. My blood boiled as I saw them acting so comfortably, so boldly, in the space that was supposed to be ours. They stayed for hours, completely unaware they were being watched. At one point, Emma whispered something in his ear, and they both disappeared into the bedroom. I watched as they kissed, then began undressing each other. After a few moments, I couldn't take it anymore. I closed the app, my heart pounding in my chest, overwhelmed with a mix of rage and hurt. I had all the proof I needed. Now, it was time for action. I wanted revenge. I wanted Emma to feel the same pain, the same betrayal, that had been eating away at me, and I was going to make sure she did. The next day, I made an appointment with a lawyer. I knew I had to secure my assets and finances before anything else. I wasn't going to let Emma walk away with a dime after what she had done. The last thing I needed was for her to benefit from my hard work, especially after the betrayal I'd just uncovered. The lawyer was professional, explaining the divorce process, how we could separate everything, and what steps I needed to take to ensure I got what was rightfully mine. After leaving the office, I felt a small sense of relief, but the anger inside me was still boiling. I needed to think of the perfect way to make Emma understand the full weight of what she had done. It was hard to focus, but one thing was clear. She had to feel the consequences. Later that evening, I checked the cameras again. My hands were shaking as I watched the footage. The man, Marcus, had come back to the house. Again. It seemed like she was bringing him over every day now, as if our home had become their secret rendezvous spot. The sight of him walking into the house filled me with fury. How dare she? I couldn't let this go on. I needed to make her pay for what she was doing to me, to us. And then, just like that, an idea came to me. It was perfect. It would expose everything, and it would hit her where it hurt the most. I leaned back, a twisted satisfaction creeping in as I thought about what I was going to do next. My idea hit me like a bolt of lightning. It was perfect, cruel, and exactly what she deserved. I would fly her parents in without telling her to surprise her. They hadn't seen Emma in months, and I knew they'd be excited to visit. I'd take care of everything, booking their flights, arranging their stay, and keep it all a secret from her. I'd pick them up from the airport and make sure that during that time, Emma would be at home with Marcus. She'd think it was just another normal day. But when I would bring her parents back to the house, we'd catch them, caught in the act, right in front of her parents. There would be no way for her to deny what was happening. A few hours later, I called her parents, making sure Emma wasn't around to overhear. I told them about my plan to fly them in as a surprise for Emma, explaining that it had been a while since they'd seen her, and that it would be a nice gesture. They were immediately on board, excited to surprise her. After hanging up, I decided to check Emma's phone again. I scrolled through her messages, and sure enough, there it was. She had texted Marcus, telling him to come over tomorrow around 4 p.m. Everything was aligning perfectly, her plan and mine, perfectly timed. I booked the tickets, confirmed the details with her parents, and made sure everything was set. The next morning, I told Emma that I'd be working late that day, giving her more space to do whatever she had planned with Marcus. I wanted to make sure everything went smoothly and that she wouldn't feel rushed or worried. I took the day off from work, knowing I had to be ready for what was coming. I spent a few hours at a cafe, letting the idea of what I was about to do sink in. After grabbing a quick bite, I made my way to the airport. The timing had to be perfect. Emma's parents were set to arrive at 4 p.m., the exact same time Marcus would be arriving at the house. When they landed, I quickly checked the cameras at home, wanting to make sure everything was in place. I watched the footage carefully, and sure enough, Marcus had arrived, just as expected. The timing was perfect. I picked up Emma's parents and we headed straight to the house. I couldn't help but feel a rush of anticipation as I drove. Everything was going according to plan. Once we arrived, I parked the car and walked to the front door, making sure Emma and Marcus had no clue we were here. I opened the door quietly and stepped inside, motioning for her parents to follow me. We barely stepped into the living room when we heard muffled sounds coming from the bedroom. Sounds I knew all too well. My heart raced, but I kept calm, turning to her parents with a whispered, "Stay quiet. Let's surprise her." We moved silently down the hallway closer to the bedroom. As we got nearer, the sounds grew louder, moans, unmistakable and clear. I glanced at her parents and we all exchanged a knowing look. Emma had no idea what was about to happen. I slowly turned the doorknob, taking a deep breath. With one swift motion, I opened the door. There in our bed were Emma and Marcus, completely caught off guard, tangled up in each other. Emma froze the moment she saw us, her face draining of color. Marcus quickly scrambled to pull away, but it was too late. The shock in the room was deafening. Emma stammered, her words faltering as she tried to cover herself with the blanket. "What? What are you doing here?" she gasped, her eyes wide with panic. Her parents stood behind me, their faces a mix of disbelief and anger. They couldn't hide their shock as they took in the scene. You're really doing this?" her mother said, her voice trembling with a mix of hurt and fury. Marcus, still half-dressed, awkwardly tried to sit up, but there was no escaping the moment. Emma looked at me, then at her parents, but there was no excuse she could make. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered, but no words could undo what had just happened. Her voice faltered, and I could see the guilt and shame in her eyes. "No, Emma, it's exactly what it looks like," I said, my voice low but steady. "You've been lying to me, to everyone, and now we're all here to witness the truth." Her mother stepped forward, her voice shaking with anger. "How could you do this? How could you betray your husband, your family like this?" Emma didn't know what to say. She sat there in silence, the weight of her actions finally sinking in. Marcus didn't speak either, just looking between Emma and her parents, clearly unsure of what to do. After a few seconds of tense silence, he quickly scrambled to grab his clothes, pulling them on as fast as he could. Without saying a word, Marcus grabbed his jacket and rushed out of the room, leaving Emma, her parents, and me standing there in the aftermath of everything. "Mom, Dad, please," Emma said weakly, her face flushed with humiliation. I can explain. This is all a mistake." "A mistake?" I scoffed, stepping closer. "No, Emma. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. You chose to do this behind my back, and now we're all here to see the truth." "Tom, I am sorry. I love you," she said, her voice breaking. "This is how you show your love to me?" I snapped. "By bringing another man into my house?" Her parents stood there, speechless, staring at her with a mix of disbelief and hurt. The silence in the room was suffocating. Emma's eyes welled up with tears, but I could see she knew there was no going back now. Her parents had seen everything. Finally, her father spoke up, his voice cold. "We raised you better than this, Emma. How could you?" He trailed off, unable to find the words to express the disappointment in his voice. I looked at Emma one last time, my anger and disappointment overwhelming me. "Enough, Emma," I said firmly. "I'm done. I'm filing for divorce. You'll face the consequences of what you've done." Her eyes widened, guilt and fear flooding her face. "Tom, please, don't do this. I never meant for it to go this far. I was confused." "You were confused?" I shot back, my disbelief palpable. "You've been seeing him behind my back and now it's a mistake." Her parents stood silent, her father shaking his head in disgust. "I won't let you play me like this anymore. You chose this, and now you'll pay." "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, but I didn't respond. The damage was done. I turned to her parents. "I'm sorry you had to see this," I said quietly, "but I need to do what's best for me now." Without saying another word, I walked out, ignoring Emma's pleas. There was no turning back now. The divorce process began almost immediately, and everything unfolded quickly after that. Emma didn't put up much of a fight, her guilt and shame having already taken their toll on her. In the end, she didn't receive anything from the divorce. Not a single asset, not a cent. It wasn't an easy decision to make, but it was the right one. I had been betrayed in the worst way possible, and it was time to move on. The hardest part was seeing Emma's parents leave, the sorrow in their eyes lingering long after they were gone. They had their own sense of loss, watching their daughter destroy her marriage. But for me, this was the end. I didn't need to wait for any more betrayal. I wasn't going to waste another minute in a relationship built on lies. As I walked away, I knew the only thing I could do now was rebuild my life. Thank you for watching.